We just thought we'd just give you a quick update on the tomato tunnel and just report on the varieties that we've been growing this year and how they're going. In general, as a tunnel, this has been working really well. I'd say it's definitely a bit shadier than our other tunnel, so it doesn't receive as much daylight, but it has been obviously better than growing them outside, and they've been growing really well in what was the old goat bedding. So yeah, I think in general it's so far been a success. No disease or pests. Got some frogs we've been finding in here, lots of spiders and things, so I'm sure that they've been helping. We've got 4 varieties, 4 rows of tomatoes. There was some wonderings whether they were a bit too close together, but so far I've found no issues. I've pruned them reasonably heavily, so pretty much taken off all the leaves, I mean basically about halfway up the plant, to allow for more airflow. I generally water with a can, about one 13-litre can for each of these rows of about 12 or 13 plants once a day. And I water at the base of the plants mainly just to avoid getting the rest of the plant wet, which could lead to fungal disease. Just the other day pinched out the tops of these tomato plants, so that's because they've got 4, or sometimes because I've left it a bit too late, for more than 4 of the flowering trusses. So that means that hopefully they'll have enough energy and time left in the season to ripen plenty of these tomatoes that they're now growing. I've been amazed at the amount of tomatoes actually on a lot of these trusses, so fingers crossed that they will all ripen, but I've been picking them very consistently pretty much every day to try and, although this is just the start of the season of them starting to ripen, I'm trying to get it so that we have enough to give everyone in the box some tomatoes one week. Last week was our first week of tomatoes for the box. That was for the larges and extra larges, but not the smalls yet. So we need a good portion to give about 46 good shares of tomatoes. So that might come maybe next week, I'd imagine. So I'll just give a quick overview on how we've managed this tunnel and how it all began. So we had the goats in here over winter and used a kind of deep litter system. So there were many layers of hay and straw in here that they'd added their own manure to, and that basically started to break down while they were in here. They were in here until kind of early to mid-spring. We actually removed most of that and took that to our compost pile, but we left a small layer which became a kind of surface mulch for the existing soil that was already in this polytunnel. So I actually just raked that into 4 very thin raised beds through this polytunnel. This polytunnel is 10 feet wide and 20 feet long. And these beds are probably only a foot wide. I planted about 12 or 13 tomato plants along each row. Basically just raked up the leftover goat bedding and planted straight into that, adding some existing compost that we'd made from the goat bedding from the previous year. So these tomatoes really had quite a lot of fertility to grow in at the beginning. The main issue that happened right at the start was that the goat bedding that had been left in here, it hadn't raised to a temperature yet where the weed seeds and things, or the what was actually red clover seeds and some of the barley from their feed hadn't been killed off. So that all suddenly sprouted up. So it looked lovely, but it was starting to block out the tomatoes a little bit. So we actually brought quite a lot of wood chip in here, about 2 trailer loads, and put that on top of the existing mulch that the tomatoes were planted into. I made sure to feed them a lot during this time as well, because with the wood chip breaking down, that really could have robbed some of the nitrogen from the soil. So I made sure to also feed the tomatoes a lot. So they got a lot of different feeds, nettle feed, some seaweed feed, some whey, during that early part of their growth. As they've been growing, I've been pruning them and planted these Greek basil between them, which have really, some of them have done really well, some not so well. Really variable size of leaves. Some are reasonably large for a mini basil. Some are very small leaved, but really beautiful bush that's kind of wrapped itself around the tomato plant, which I think is really great. We've got a tomato growing down amongst the basil here, so I'm hoping it'll be basil flavoured when it ripens, but we'll see. This basil is really beautiful. I'm really enjoying it. I actually really like the small leaf size because when you put that in a tomato salad, it's just these tiny bursts of flavour. You don't need to chop up like a bigger leaf or anything. I mean, the theory is that it's an even stronger flavour in a smaller leaf. I haven't directly compared them though. So let's just have a look at the 4 different varieties that we've decided to grow in the polytunnel this year, and I can just let you know how we found they are up here in Scotland. Variety on the side here. This is actually a short vine variety of tomato called Wentzell, Wentzell. I actually chose 2 shorter vine varieties for the size of this very small polytunnel because I knew that the curve on the roof of the polytunnel would get in the way of their growth a little bit. They're doing really well, these ones. These grow into a very large beef tomato. I love these kind of tomatoes because it's like a steak when you cut it up into kind of rounds. It's obviously quite tough to get a tomato like this to ripen really successfully in our climate. This is meant to be for a kind of slightly shorter season. I have recently picked the ripe tomatoes in here, so there's not that many ripe ones, but we have had a few from these plants. The flavour has been really good, but it's been slightly on the mealy side. So it's still been nice on like a piece of toast, just like this massive slab of tomato. But yeah, it could maybe be a bit better. Maybe if we'd have had a slightly better summer, it might have been a bit more successful. But yeah, I think I would grow this one again just because of the size of tomato and the shape, and the flavour is really good. And they have grown well. So these are kind of probably my 3rd favourite out of the 4 varieties in here. So this one is called Purple Ukraine, so would imply, yes, it's kind of Eastern Europe rather than America, this one. And I've been loving this one so far. This is one of the bigger ones that we've gotten off of this. I mean, I love the variety in shapes on this. They tend to veer towards more of a kind of plum tomato, which I just love the shape of anyway. I think I just seem to love all the shapes of tomatoes actually, but I mean, there's a variety of sizes, obviously, but some have got almost like a banana shape to them. I don't know if that's because of how we're growing them, but yeah, there's one down there that's like a curved, long one. And some growing really big. I mean, this is one of the bigger ones. I picked one from the big polytunnel yesterday that was even bigger than this one. So we'll see how the big ones on this do, because I haven't picked any that are much larger than this, to be honest, so far. This doesn't look ripe, and it's not quite ripe, but actually they don't go bright red, these ones. They're more of a kind of, it's a kind of an indescribable colour. It's like light bronzy lilac brown red. Very tasty. These ones are really nice. It's beautiful when you cut into it, even though it may look like a slightly bland colour. When you cut into it, you've got some really nice kind of khaki greens and pinky reds that complement each other really well. Aside from that, I think it's a really, really good flavour, this one. And if you pick them at the right time, which I tend to just as they've gone ripe and let them ripen a day or so in the house, that seems to, for some reason, result in them being a lot less mealy. So these ones are really tasty, and these are my, I think, favourite. They also started producing fruit almost as early as the next variety, but second earliest in here, and they also are really heavily bearing, whereas the Wentzell here isn't that heavily bearing, although they're quite large fruits. And again, this is Purple Ukraine, available from Real Seeds. Oh, one thing to note about this one, the leaves look curled from maybe dehydration. This is just what the leaves look like on this plant. I don't know why, it came with the description of them, but that's just something to note. So they are perfectly well watered and happy, and if you grow them yourself, don't forget that. They may just look a bit sad, but they are perfectly happy and will produce lots of fruit for you. So this variety here is the other best performing tomato this year, and this is called Stupice, Stupice. I think this variety is from Bulgaria. It has produced by far, I think, the most fruit, although I would say I don't think the flavour is quite as good as the Purple Ukraine. I mean, I've been picking ripe fruit from them every day for a while now, and they're just incredibly heavily bearing. The leaves are quite large. All of these tomato plants have something quite unusual looking about them. These have almost kind of potato shaped leaves, but very big ones. Again, these huge cascades of fruit. And I would say that, yes, if you're looking for a tomato variety that seems to bear very heavily in a kind of shorter season and colder climate, this is probably the best out of all of them so far. I mean, look, that's just like, it's so heavy. There's so many tomatoes on these plants. Final variety in here is the Ruby. It's another short vine tomato, so hence why I put it on the other side of the polytunnel. Don't want to be a downer on this one. It's my least favourite probably though this season. I've just pinched out the tops of these. They've got 3 or 4 flowering trusses on them at the moment, but they've really been the slowest to develop. So they've got a lovely kind of chunky central stem and seem to be the healthiest at the beginning of the season. But I picked my first ripe tomato yesterday from these guys. This one I'll probably pick in a couple days. But yeah, they're just not producing as much fruit by far as the other varieties in here. They're just not ripening as quickly. But I have not tried one yet. I have not tried the one that I picked yesterday. It might be really, really delicious. So just gonna wait and see. I don't want to shoot this one down before I've given it all of the tests, including the taste test, which is kind of the most important. But all in all, I'd say all of these tomatoes have done really well so far this season, and yeah, I think we've learned quite a lot with what we might grow next year. One thing that I have regretted this year is not growing the Latar tomatoes. I did sow some early in the season along with these guys, but didn't have space in this tunnel. Didn't have the time to make a whole bed for them. Well, I didn't have the space for them in the other polytunnel, and just decided to, and I had planned to maybe make a little outdoor bed out here, but it just, time got away with us and we didn't get to. So I did throw them in quite late after letting them get a bit sad in their pots into a very weedy bed outside of this polytunnel, and they produced ripe fruit outside after being stunted as well and totally neglected in a weedy bed with no love before any of these tomatoes did. So I think they showed me a little bit that I should be working with those tomatoes. So next year, I think we'll probably try one full outdoor bed in the market garden of, hopefully, of those, of the Latar tomatoes, because they really are delicious and very productive, and seemingly so in Scotland. And that's the tomato update as of now.
Oh, that's great. Thanks, Rosa, for that update on the tomatoes. I really am benefiting a lot from this tunnel because Rosa has put a huge amount of work in to looking after this as a project, and of course I'm getting to taste the results, which are fantastic. Yeah, tomatoes on toast for lunch out in the sun, and you can't beat that.